right, guys, we are back on the show here. I have a very special episode here. This is one I've been waiting for probably, I'm going to say 10 episodes if I feel like at this point. So I have a very interesting guest here who I've been trying to get on for probably a good couple weeks. And
I'm very elusive.
Yes. So I would like to welcome everyone to this special episode of the Command Your Brand Show. We're going to be talking about different things on this podcast. And basically, we have a very special employee that we have here who is, a very well-known publicist in the area. She is, my future wife we're all getting married. And she has like very special degrees and actually is amazing at theater lighting. And has a lot of talents. I do want to give an introduction to Rebecca Shumel.
Thank you.
So thanks for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's their first in person.
That's right. That's right. So people know what you look like and you're a real person.
I'm a real person.
She's not an AI, even though
I'm not an AI.
Even basically if I were to picture an AI, this would be what my AI would look like.
Thank you. You have to say that.
That's right. So I guess what we want to talk about first is, I guess for people who don't know you, so you are a Command Your Brand employee. Mm-hmm. So I guess tell us a little bit about yourself and about your background and you.
Yeah. So I started out like in performance, and like all I wanted to do was sing and just like be up in front of people and, be silly and dance. And, throughout my life, I've tried to translate that into something that I could make money with.
Yes.
Truthfully. But also it was important for me to make people happy. And then kind of like earlier on, like college years, I found that like backstage and performance, like that's also very interesting to me. Like, how do the lights work? How does it's like crafting an idea, and it's like essentially creating PR for the audience. Like, how do I want these people to view what it is that I'm putting out on stage? Mm-hmm. And how I found Command Your Brand is, I'm a big fan of media, and I think it's important that, like I am helping with giving people a voice on the right platforms to give them the most amount of engagement possible. And I feel very gratified to be able to do that.
Of course.
And help people with getting their mission out there. So
nice.
That's what I do.
So then I guess in terms of you yourself, why did you choose theater lighting and performing arts and all that stuff? Like why did you go in there first?
Well, I mean, since I was a kid, I'm dating myself a little bit here, but I'm 30 and I loved like the Backstreet Boys, and like in like third grade, I'd be like sing, and like everyone thought it was super annoying, but I thought it was cool. I'm cool. It's whatever. Yeah. So like I always just really enjoyed doing it, and enjoyed singing and performing, and just really like the create, like a world's creation is really made by artists from what I can see. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be among artist circles. So I thought, if I could, I think like media and PR is kind of a way to translate that into like affecting bigger change throughout the world. Like I work with people every day that are really they're opinion leaders in their space, and that I have the opportunity to give them like a platform, like the right platform to speak on, it's very rewarding. So yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And I guess like, how did you come to Command Your Brand? Like what got you to the point of like, I want to do podcasting. Podcasting is my thing. Like what got you to there in the first place?
Yeah. I mean, podcasting specifically is actually a niche that I wasn't super familiar with until I, did some research on Command Your Brand and see how actually, you have 30 minutes to an hour to give people as much value as possible and help them. Like that is the purpose from what I can see so far of, if you're a guest on a podcast and you're providing as much value as possible and, you're actually solving a problem for the people that are listening, it really creates change in like a ripple effect way. Cause this person tells their friends, who tells their family, who tells whomever, like, cause they want to help ultimately, right? Like, I think we all kind of have a desire to help other people. And, this is a small way that I'm able to do that.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so what about it do you feel helps them the most? Like people who get on podcasts, what do you find that when the clients that we work with, what do you feel like it helps them the most?
Well, I'll just give you an example. We work with people that are kind of all walks of life. And, I, for one, have seen there's a lot of people that struggle out there, and especially like if you have like a health condition or like people that are in pain are, and in particular, like you definitely want to help someone like that. You know what I mean? So like we work with a lot of like holistic doctors and alternative medicine folks. And they like, that's kind of a great example that I can give, like how they are solving a problem for people directly. Like I'm working with somebody right now that specializes in headaches. And like you would think like, oh, just pop some ibuprofen and then my headache goes away. But, like it was because of I had the opportunity to talk to him that I realized like, oh, this is a symptom to maybe an underlying problem. And like, there would be no way of knowing unless it was shown to me. You know what I mean? So like podcasts are an opportunity for guests to be able to show like what their unique skill set is and solve a problem that people maybe they don't even know that they have and can find a solution to. Like maybe they were looking for that solution for a long time. So yeah, I would say like that's the immediate effect that I could see.
Interesting. So with people that go on podcasts, like what do you say the highest rated people, like what are the people that go on podcasts the most that you find?
That, I mean, like there's over 3 million podcasts out there.
Yeah.
Right. And they're all different types of genres. I wouldn't say like I could see like one specific type that go on podcasts, but it's more like, what are you interested in talking about? You know what I mean? Because there's a podcast for everybody. And then there's kind of like what I find is great about Command Your Brand specifically is we are able to source what are the best podcasts out there, like the top rated podcasts out there, because, everyone and their grandma is able to have a podcast.
Yeah.
But, we want people to actually engage on the content, and by engaging, it's showing like that we're helping you. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't say that there is a specific subject matter that is most widespread across the podcast domain. But I will say that there are certain podcasts that are more wide reaching than others.
Right.
And they're all different themes. So, whether you're interested in music or holistic health or business or entrepreneurship, there's a podcast for you. Maybe to be a guest, but also to listen and learn from. So
interesting. Yeah. I definitely find that a lot of podcasts nowadays, like they're very heavily focused on educational type things, like just, either learning about either a podcaster or just learning about health or whatever. Like people just listen like as they're like doing their runs or whatever. Like it's very interesting that you point out that like just people go on podcasts and there's always a podcast for someone, no matter what area they're looking for.
Yeah. And, to your point, like with the like educational quality, like that's, again, what I mean by showing value for the podcast, right? If I'm being able to take something away of value, whether I buy from the guest or not, or whether it's, podcasts are not an advertisement, they're really just trying to get a story, a message, what it is that you want to explain, and a call to action. Like, where do you want people to find you?
Totally. And so what do you find? So, that people, for example, they try to go on a podcast, right? And I think one of the biggest struggles is like, oh, I want to get on this top rated show. Like literally I want to be on Joe Rogan, for example. And it's like, I can't do it because they won't even either answer me or they just won't they won't talk to me. Like, what do you find is the most difficult? Like, what do you think the most difficulty is in actually getting on these podcasts? Like, what do you find that people run into with that?
I think for me, that I've, myself and my team, we've written a lot of copy, and I think just not being afraid to communicate and just like being willing to, put yourself out there and be real with your communication, because people are smart. Like they're able to tell if you're being genuine or not. And the more bite that your story has to it, And the more that people are able to relate to you and identify with what you have to say, the more interested they're going to be. Also, too, with podcast hosts is they have a content calendar, right? So like they have a specific thing that they want to get across maybe for that quarter, right? And it's my job as the publicist and my job as the person representing the guest to do that research and make sure that what the guest is saying and what the podcast host wants are in alignment with each other. So that way, they can both get as much value out of the content as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah. When you say bites, like what do you mean by bite? Like if something is biting, what does that mean?
So by bite, I mean like, okay. I don't mean like sensational.
Yeah, of course. But like, what do you, when you say like, it's like they got to bite at it and like kind of like sink their teeth?
It grabs your attention.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? Like, for example, I'm representing somebody. His name is James Arthur Ray, and he has an incredible story. And, a lot of people already know who he is. And honestly, his name itself has star power to it. Right. And not to mention like how his story is so harrowing and his wife too, Bersaba. So I will communicate like, have you ever like, and you really want to talk to the person from across the street. I know that, through email, it's kind of just words and just blah, blah. But like, it's like, I'm a person on the other side. I'm trying to reach with my communication to that other relay point so that they can understand what I'm saying. Right. So I might talk to them and say, have you ever been betrayed? Has this ever happened to you? Like frame it so that I can actually talk to the person despite the barrier of a screen.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And the more real that your communication is, like people want that. People are starving for real connection and community.
Yeah.
So
totally. And I find it interesting too is like, people who come on the podcast, like I always try to find something that's interesting about I want to have some interest in the person.
Sure.
Because I feel like if there's no interest in what they want to talk about, it's like I can't really communicate to the person. So I think it's what you mentioned was you have to communicate fully your thing, but also like give a story almost like you have a backstory, like, who is it? I remember, her, I have a close friend who I'm trying to still get on the podcast is Zoltan.
Oh my gosh.
And
Zoltan. Yeah, he's great.
Who's got he's got a lot of people he's just done so much between his humanitarian work and just this work that he's done. And it's like, he literally went from being homeless to like being like a multi-million-dollar company.
Yeah. But like, that's a great example. So somebody like Zoltan, Zoltan will have his episode and he's going to be able to represent himself. He'll have the opportunity, but just from hearing him speak from my own viewpoint, this is something that like he inspires others to be better.
Right.
Right. And, it's possible, like for me, what I find the most interesting in a guest is like, is it possible to like, is this something that I can relate to myself? Like, wow, you went from like the absolute rock bottom to like the absolute top in one lifetime. Like that's incredible. That sounds like something that is desirable, actionable, and in alignment with what I'm interested in knowing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So,
right. It's just a fascinating thing. Like just, especially for me, like seeing someone who goes from nothing to something is like a big deal.
Yeah.
And I find that also too, like in a store, like when you're pitching to people, like you're trying to get their attention first. Right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, it's also important too, like if you're just a podcast host or a guest, to survey. Who is the audience that you are interested in reaching? Have you asked them what it is that they're interested in learning about? What problems are they running into? It's actually quite simple. Like, I feel like in the world of entrepreneurship, there's no guideline really. And it's kind of just like nobody teaches you how to be an entrepreneur. You kind of go from being an employee to being like, okay, now nobody is like an entrepreneur. Like nobody is pushing me to do anything. This is all on me. You know what I mean? So like I could see, a lot of podcast hosts, they are entrepreneurs themselves. A lot of the guests that, Command Your Brand works with in particular are also entrepreneurs. And they found something from a particular podcast audience that is a problem for them because they survey, because they ask. It's as simple as asking.
Right.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So it was kind of cool is that it's interesting because like, you know, people don't know what they want. Like they don't really ask the question of like, how can I know? What should I ask? What shouldn't I ask? You know, I guess for people, let's say that can't come to Command Your Brand maybe at this time, or they're trying to do it themselves.
Sure.
What do you suggest to those people when they're pitching out to others, like other podcasters or even, you know, other shows? What do you suggest to those people who are CEOs or founders that want to get on those podcasts that would make it more enlightening for the other side to actually get on those podcasts?
Well, I think actually a lot of it is in the approach of how you are reaching the podcast host. Because if you're reaching like from the viewpoint of like, oh, I want you to, like, you're doing me a favor by allowing me to be on your podcast, you know, because I'm going to bring so much value. No, you want to come to the podcast like, you want to admire that person, right? Like, and from a genuine place, not just admiration for admiration's sake, just like, why are you reaching out to that podcast host, you know, to talk to them? Like, hey, I'm really interested in what your show has to say. And, you know, I noticed this, and this topic when, you know, that episode, I really liked that episode, like a genuine communication of like how I'm interested in what you have to say. And it just builds an affinity between you and the podcast host. And if you come to the table from how do I make this the best episode that I could possibly make this for you, and come as a guest that wants to provide value, you don't want to receive, you want to provide value.
Right.
Then you're going to make so many communication lines between podcast hosts, different guests, you know, like if, you know, you're coming from a place of wanting to exchange with them first. You know what I mean? So I think that's number one, like come to the table with wanting to provide value and wanting to exchange with the podcast host first. The next thing I would say is, you know, what is it that you want to offer to the episode? Like you should do your research, right? Like, because if, let's say I'm a finance bro and I'm reaching out to cooking shows because I didn't do my research, you know, like there is no alignment really between those two types of ideas, right? So if I've shown you, hey, I've done my research, hey, I've listened to this, and this podcast, you know, I'd really like to contribute in X way with these topics, like be specific, you know, do the work for them, make it very easy for them to say yes. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like one thing that I think is very important, like just for example, and unique about Command Your Brand specifically is, you know, for every guest, we put together media kits for them. You know, we have a really extensive onboarding program, which, you know, we don't know what the guest doesn't know. And so we want to make sure that they come to the table as the best guest possible. For a lot of them, it's, oh, I'm familiar with this. And for some of them, it's new data, you know, like teaching them, how do I be the best guest possible? What do you want to talk about? Oh, okay. This, and this thing, you know, what are a few talking points? You know, who do you want to reach? Who do you want to help?
Yeah.
Right. So we package that very nicely and very easily for any podcast host to look at, you know, where it should be a quick snapshot of like a yes or no, because like they get pitched 1,000 times per month. What is it that's going to be interesting that you have to say that somebody else might have not said? You know what I mean? So that's kind of the best thing I could say is like come to the table with wanting to exchange, and also do your research on what value you could provide for them in terms of what talking points or what topics that you want to talk about, and do and produce that. You know, when you get on the recording, you're going to produce those things that you want to share of value.
Nice.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's kind of long-winded.
Yeah, that's okay. No, it's good.
Sorry.
But it's interesting because, you know, have you ever met someone who is just, you know, excuse my French, but very like a smart ass? Like they're just very like, oh, I want to get on the biggest top podcast because I got all the things I need to. I know everything there is to know. And I'm like this hot shot person. Have you ever run like someone like that before? Yeah. Like, do you find it real enough? Like, you know, we have all these big shows. We have like, you know, Timcast and, you know, Joe Rogan. And like, we have all these different types of podcasts, like the hugest podcasts in the world. Do you find it's actually real for people to actually get on those podcasts? Like up in front, right, like just right out
the gate?
Yeah.
Well, no, I think that respect is earned.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that type of, that level, you really have to earn that. Like, one thing that I think is really important, and this is something that I tell clients all the time, is I'm creating a portfolio for you. Like, you're being the guest, and, you know, I'm securing these placements for you. You know, I want them to be in alignment with what you want to talk about.
Yeah.
But I'm now able to use this portfolio as leverage to get bigger podcasts. Because at the end of the day, bigger podcasts, guests are very easy to come by. There's, you know, lots of people pitching them. You know what I mean? But if you're somebody that's of a caliber that can provide value, because again, like that value mark changes depending on the type of podcast that you are reaching out to. Like, somebody like Joe Rogan is probably going to be looking for somebody that's at a really high value bar.
Yeah.
And they can provide certain information that's very unique, you know, as opposed to a different kind of podcast that might not be of the same caliber.
Yeah.
So definitely not. It's respect is earned. Right.
Do you think it has anything to do with social media, like having a big social media following?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just about having a social media following. It's how much are people engaging on the content. Because, you know, if I look at your posts and I see 1 or 2 likes and you know, you have 100 million followers, like, that, it doesn't add up. You know what I mean? So, like, you have to be consistently posting things that people are going to want to engage on. How do you do that? You survey. You ask them what it is that's needed and wanted by them so that they are going to engage on the information, right? But a very specific public. Like, by public, I mean women, men, older men, pet parents, you know, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So,
no, it's interesting because, you know, I find that people who have nothing, sort of like people who don't have a big following of any kind or hasn't been on many podcasts, won't get on those big podcasts because there's no media under their belts. I find that, and sometimes I find that's lacking with a lot of people, is that they think they know all there is to know about it, and so they fall on their face and they're like, "Why am I not getting on these big shows?" Because you've never been on any shows before.
Sure. I mean, one of the barriers to successful media is thinking that you already know everything about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that you don't need help. And you may not need help, but, like, I think if you do have people that have had experience in this area being able to lift you up and put you in the correct circles, then they're able to guide you in the direction that you want to go. And eventually you won't need people, you know, like I think it's really important, like, people that don't necessarily have a team or the ability to have someone pitch them out to podcasts and secure placements for them. Yeah. They could do a course, you know, like, it's like, what is public relations? Right? It's making good works well known, right? And effective public relations is that people, from what I could see, is that people are going to engage on that content, right? If you send out 1,000 emails and don't get anything back, was that effective public relations? Not really. And it takes years of experience and putting yourself out there and being willing to communicate with these hosts to get to a higher and higher level. So when you have that big portfolio, you can use that as leverage to secure bigger podcasts for yourself, or not just podcasts, like speaking engagements, you know, like lots of other things.
Right.
Yeah.
That's very cool. It's very, it's such an interesting way to put it, because it's sort of like you have to sort of build yourself first before you get on those podcasts, I find.
Right. Like no one is going to buy from somebody that they don't know who they are.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's not even just about what you can sell to them. It's like, how much are you able to help them? Who have you helped lately?
Right. Do you think there should be steps taken before they actually go on podcasts? Like, do you think, as a publicist, like, is there anything that you feel like people make mistakes on just before they get on podcasts that they should have done earlier?
Yeah. I think it's important to, you know, I guess mistakes.
My phone is telling me how I'm making mistakes. Just kidding. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think just having a good setup, like having a good mic, having, you know, just like your tech in, so that people can see you on the screen, people can hear you. It's like fun to listen to you, because at the end of the day, you know, people are going to be listening to podcasts while they're doing other things, right? And like, you know, I like to say this in the onboarding. Sorry, my face is so itchy.
Yeah.
That, like, you know, you want to paint a picture for the for the listener, right? So, but if your mic is crackly and if your lighting sucks, like, you know, it's much harder to convey that image as a guest.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely very interesting the way you put that, because like I feel like some people don't realize that there's a setup process to actually get on podcasts, because
it's all put together when you see it, right?
Right.
Like it took a lot of time and effort to place things, and what do I want to talk about, you know, like communicate with the host, like what's going to be of value to you. Like there was a whole that's the biggest parallel that I can see as a publicist and working in media to, you know, performing arts. Like anytime that you go to a live performance, that was literally months and months and months and months of preparation but you're just seeing the 2 hours of it all together.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, there's a lot of like legwork that goes into being a good guest, having a good setup, and understanding like what the needs and wants are of your public so that you can provide as much value to them as possible.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Well, that's really awesome that you gave me that. And I guess now we'll deep dive into our personal life a little bit. So,
Okay.
So I guess I want to kind of go over, why don't you tell us how tell the world how we met?
Well, we had some mutual friends.
Yeah.
And I was just, I don't know. I was at a place where I was like, there is no, I do not want men in my life, just to keep it simple.
Yeah.
And like you saw me walking down the stairs, and I was like getting ready to leave, and you like hold the door open for me, and that's like this. I'm gonna relate it back to podcasts, everybody. So
yeah.
So you hold the door open for me, and you're like, "Hey, do you want to go out?" And I was like, "No."
Yeah.
And you're just like, "Why not? Like, just come out with me." Like, it was so, like, your communication impinged so much on me that I was like, "Okay." Like, you gave me the command. "Okay, good. Yeah, let's go out." And then, you know, that was 4 years ago, and you know, like, kind of the rest is history.
Yeah.
And that's something that I really admire about you and that I've learned from, like, into being good in media and good in public relations, is like you have to have a really high ability to communicate. You know, like you push through the barriers, and you were like, "Hey, let's go out," and then we did.
That's great.
You know, so that's it.
That's cool. And it's funny because I don't know, I've got this there seems to be a really bad stigma, I guess you can say, about how when couples work together, their relationships don't last. Like when they work in the same office, like no one, any person have asked me about it, like they say, "Don't do it. That's like not a good idea to work with someone." Like, so what has it been like working with you with a relationship? Yeah, with someone with the relationship already, but like you're in the workforce of that same place.
Well, I think that it's not really about like that. Maybe this is not something that like other couples have, but like I feel like you and I are very aligned in our purpose.
Yeah.
You know, and like we want to help people ultimately.
Right.
Like you're helping people with, you know, your podcast and providing value, and I'm helping people by getting them on different types of podcasts that help them and like change the viewpoint of the people listening. Right. So I think because we are aligned in that purpose, you know, we both really care about what happens to these people. Like I really do, you know, I want all of the guests that I work with to succeed, and I want them to flourish and prosper. And I feel like you feel the same way. So without purpose, there is no point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, if you're just going to a job just to make a check, I salute you, but that sucks.
True.
And it's not something that I would want for anybody. So I'm really grateful that, you know, Command Your Brand has given us the opportunity to work together in like different parts of the company, because we see like PR from like two very different angles, right? So, I think that's what I would say.
Nice. Well, I think it's interesting because I personally, I think the idea of working with your wife or your or, you know, your girlfriend or whatever is such a really cool honor, because like, you know, you work together, yes, you kind of sort of talk about it at home and whatever, but like you kind of have the same reality. Like you guys can communicate on the same page almost, because like, you know, what's happening in the company, you also know what's kind of going on and how can we fix it and what can we do about it. So,
Sure.
I find it interesting. I feel like that's such a key point because, in any stable relationship, there has to be some type of communication, right?
Yeah.
So for people like, let's say who are either looking in a relationship or even like, they're having a hard time with their relationship in their bit, maybe because they work with them or whatever. What do you think are the key to successful marriages or like relationship? Like, because you and I have been together 4 years, and there's times where like it was great, sometimes it was not so great, and like whatever.
Yeah.
What do you find is what was the key to have a successful relationship?
You're asking me. This is the question of the ages,
Yes, since the dawn of time.
Well, I mean, sure. Like so
what do you find is successful?
What do I find? I mean, well, look, we're 30. We're not like, so I can only talk from my viewpoint. Like, I haven't been married for 50 years, so somebody else might have a different viewpoint than me. But just from my experience, I mean, being able to have the same purpose and being able to share the same reality, by reality, I mean like the agreement on like what it is that's important to both people.
Yeah.
That's very important. Like for you and I, just as an example, is, we want to affect positive change in the world.
Yeah.
Right. And like we're doing that in a widespread way and giving people a platform, like a positive message. Right. So, yeah, I would say just being alignment in your purpose and also a really, really high ability to communicate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just like allowing the other person to be themselves, because ultimately, like, when you first get together with somebody, like they don't show you who they really are until months later in the honeymoon stage, like, but you still like me, so yeah. I must have done something right?
Yes.
I'm just kidding, but like after a couple of months, like you really see who they really are, and you have to be willing to have that, like and help them. What is it that like help them become a better person, communicate what's needed and wanted, and don't give up. Like I feel like people are so quick to say, oh, this isn't, for me, unless you have like a deal breaker, like you have to be aligned with like your religion, with how you spend money, kids, those kinds of things. And like, if you're not aligned, it's probably not going to work out. But if you are, everything else is kind of gravy. Like you have to be willing to give 100%, but also get 100%. Like it's an ebb and flow of what each partner needs. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you would know. Like,
yeah, of course. Well, it's part of, there is a high level of communication, but there's also, again, like I mentioned, like there's a reality of like, there has to be a lot of level of communication in any relationship. Like that's really the key thing, is just what can we do to handle something, and something goes wrong, that how you handle it, and then you just have that high level of communication,
right? It's not you and I like against each other, it's you and I against the problem,
right?
And like what are we going to do to affect positive change, like be causative over this problem to kind of come back on the other side of the solution,
right? Do you find that it's harder to work with a spouse? Yeah. Do you find it can be harder to work with a spouse who's just maybe doesn't work well, or is like having a hard time? Or do you think it's really is it really just because you don't like you like them so much you don't want to like put work involved in it? Or what do you think about that?
Maybe they're the wrong spouse then. Like if you don't want to be around them, if you don't want to work.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you and I, like, it's pretty seamless.
Yeah. But like some people, like, you have people who are like CEOs and founders who have their wives work underneath them, and like they cause a lot of problems. They're like, oh, I don't want to work with you anymore. And then it's like, then they end up divorcing because you get fired from. I
mean, that's actually not that common, like from what I've seen. I think I've only seen that like one time, and they're very good friends.
Yeah.
But usually, like, the reason you marry somebody, or the reason why you're with somebody, is because you have aligned purposes. So the business idea should be in alignment with your purposes.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So I feel like, again, like if you have the shared purpose, then you're able to kind of create on that, and there's a lot of alignment there. So I don't know. Like I it's just from my, limited viewpoint on that, but just with you and I, like I think it's because we are aligned in that way, it only makes it better to get better products, to work with more people, to help more people. Like that's ultimately the goal, right? So
yeah, okay, that's interesting. I really like, because I will say what I do like about working with you more is that we work together, and we have a goal of, our goal is in the company is like we are getting people on top rated podcasts, or I get you people who want to, come on my show. They go inevitably onto more shows because they were so enlightened on my show. Or,
yeah, that's awesome, because it can only help them,
right?
Really.
Or even on courses, they're like, oh, I build my business up from the courses or from being on my own podcast because I have one, and now I'm ready to like do more services, right? Because now,
sure.
So it's kind of like a win-win, because like you have people that come to me for educational purposes, and they come to me to go to you to get on more podcasts or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting that I think it's a very interesting duo that when you have a husband and wife that work together, and they kind of like
and go on podcasts together.
They go on podcasts together. They talk about the these issues, and like and it's like people have a hard time with communicating. I think that's the root problem, is that communication is like there's a lot of philosophers and a lot of people say that communication is the solvent of a lot of problems that people have, is not communicating enough, right? And you can always communicate, and that's where it really boils down to, is like, how much are you willing to communicate to that person, no matter how upset you are, no matter what's going on? Like you're in communication.
You care about them enough to not give up, and still try. Like if your communication comes off as like you want to help them, like people are much more inclined to want to engage with you.
Totally.
You know what I mean? So help is like a difficult subject matter.
Totally.
For a lot of people. And like you can even see it sometimes in podcast hosts where they're like, well, do I have to pay to have this guest on? Well, no, like, I'm genuinely reaching out to you because I want to help you. I want to provide value for your show. And like, it's uncommon.
Yeah.
And I think what I really admire about our group is that we're true blue, like we're like, you never lie in PR. That's like something that my senior Brielle taught me. And, she really taught me everything that I know about podcasting specifically, and like being more refined in my approach with communication, and how do I get these products, and like, because ultimately the product is like, this is something that I can stamp my name on and said, hey, I produced this for somebody.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it just is so gratifying to know that I help them in that way. So yeah, I think ultimately, like, coming back from like the relationship topic subject matter, your ability to communicate, it's twofold. Like you can do that with your partner that you might work with, or you could do that with communicating with podcast hosts, because it's an initial reach, find out what's needed and wanted, and see how you can best produce that for that person. You're willing to exchange first.
Right.
So that's I think that people really like that, and they identify with it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thank you very much for the time that we spent here. I think it was a real honor, of course. And, for people that want to know more about our services, or, they want to learn more about you, maybe they want to talk to you because either they're a podcast host or they're interested in you personally. Where can people reach out to you and kind of ask you questions, or,
you could always email me. It's Rebecca@commandyourbrand.media. Or visit our website, commandyourbrand.com. So really looking forward to all the peeps that have questions. I'm really excited to help you. And thank you so much for having me on.
Of course.
This is like a cool husband-wife episode.
Duo. That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, just happy to be here.
Yeah. Awesome. And of course, guys, if you like this, definitely like and subscribe to this. And, if you want more content like this, definitely let us know. And of course, you can definitely book a call with us. You can definitely talk to me, and maybe I'll hook you up with Rebecca. And she can definitely help you with any questions or anything you guys want. And we help you get on podcasts, or if you want to learn and do it yourself, we have courses that teach you. We have a master class. You can be on my podcast. Definitely reach out to me at, you just book a call with commandyourbrand.com. And yeah. So I thank you guys for joining us on our show. And thank you, Rebecca, for being here. And hope to you guys see you in the next one. And thanks for coming by. All right.
All right.
All right, guys.
Bye.